This is a Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 9th of November 2021, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, the high cost of indiscipline. The Standard, who'll stop the horror of school infernos? The Star, Uhuru to explain succession game plan at key event. And People Daily, Ruto Muturi to go in Jubilee Purge.
Yes.
Kick us off, JM.
Absolutely. So the National Delegates Convention is going to take place, this is of Jubilee, on the 30th of November. And it's going to be the mother of all meetings. Brace yourselves. The night of the long knives is about to begin.
About time.
And in light of this, I would like to pose two questions today. Question one, is Uhuru Kenyatta a wartime general or a peacetime general? Armchair general or frontline general? As Professor Mutahi Nguni says, Uhuru is the most analyzed politician, yet the least studied. The Jubilee Party leader is, without doubt, a wartime general. Leaders are forged out of crisis. Politicians never waste a disaster. And Uhuru is a suave combination of both a leader and a politician. And I say so because, as you may recall, when crisis struck the Kikuyus of the Valley in 2007, it was him who shepherded them out of despair. It was him who raised money, who mobilized for their resettlement, who advocated for peace and reconciliation between the warring parties, the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
That was the crisis that forged Uhuru Kenyatta. And that is why he, rather than Martha Karua, was made the Deputy Prime Minister in 2008. So lest you forget, dear Kikuyus, Uhuru Kenyatta earned the right to lead the people of the mountain. And with such a stellar record, will Kikuyus really abandon their shepherd for a wolf in sheep's clothing? I highly doubt it. So, what can we bank here? We can bank that Uhuru is not only a wartime general, but also a frontline general. And at the National Delegates Convention, he will officially be kicking off the 2022 Game of Thrones, Kenyan version. Question number two. Which of the two generals is superior, Uhuru or Ruto? In war, there are 4 battle personalities, and these personalities are measured along an XY axis against cognition and arousal, as you'll see up here. Cognition asks whether the general is a feeler or a thinker. Is he ruled by intuition or rational thought? Arousal measures the state of mind of the general. Is he tempestuous? That is he hot? Or does he have a calm demeanor? So based on how the two generals have behaved over the last 5 or so years, here's my submission. William Ruto is in the top left quadrant. He's a berserker. Berserker, just so you know, by the way, berserkers were Viking warriors who is said to have fought in a trance-like fury. In fact, it is this trait that later gave rise to the modern English word berserk, meaning fiercely violent or out of control. And that is their nature. Heart of a lion, but brain of an ox. People like Idi Amin. On this quadrant, Uhuru Kenyatta, finally, on the other hand, in my view, bears the persona of a mechanic. He is a rational thinker that plays it cool and calm, always. The mechanic is a highly skilled soldier for whom fighting is a fine art. Each battle, each blow is an interesting problem to be quickly thought through logically and to be executed with military precision. Mechanics are profoundly steady under fire. They are the most terrifying and inhuman, in fact, of opponents. They treat their enemies like specimen. And we liken Uhuru to Alexander the Great, a stellar wartime general who was politically astute and always led from the front. So big fireworks, big show coming on the 30th of November.
And it will be one we'll not anticipate. So I'd also like to talk about this big fireworks that's coming, and I'd like to announce today to the public that a vacancy has occurred in the offices of the Tanga Tanga MPs. Jubilee Party is finally expelling from its ranks all the politicians that have been disloyal to the party, and they will do it at the NDC this month. In fact, Kanini Kega has already issued a warning. He sounded the bells, and he said that anyone who has publicly declared support for UDA should not bother attending the NDC because they will be kicked out.
Amen.
Now, personally, I can't wait for the eviction because it is long overdue. Now, before the Tanga Tanga Brigade rushes to court to stop Jubilee Party from kicking them out, let us ask two fundamental questions and answer them using the law. Question one, when you're an MP, who does the seat belong to? Does it belong to you, the politician, or to the party? And I'd like to say that in Kenya, that seat belongs to the party. And according to the Political Parties Act, you cannot be a member of more than one political party at the same time. And according to the Constitution, the office of a member of parliament becomes vacant if the MP resigns or is deemed to have resigned from their party. And an MP is deemed to have resigned from their party if, when they're a member of one party called Jubilee, they form another party called UDA and promote the ideology, interests, or policies of that other party called UDA. Now, when you join a political party, you're essentially entering into a voluntary contract to support that party and its views until the next election. So if you switch allegiance before the next election, then you should be condemned as unscrupulous, opportunistic, unethical, self-serving. Worse yet, if you attend a UDA parliamentary group meeting in August and you're still pretending to be a Jubilee Party member in November, then you're engaging in corporate theft and are in possession of stolen property that you should return immediately. Now, question two. To whom is an MP chiefly responsible? Is the MP responsible to himself or herself, to the voters, or to the party? Now, in my view, our MPs are ultimately responsible to us, the people who voted them in. And PM Kamath, that is a prominent Indian political scientist, once said that when a legislature elected on a party changes his party affiliation or joins another party, he or she commits a breach of faith. This is because party identity has more influence on the minds of voters than the personal reputation of the candidate. That is why in every election since 2013, Kenyans have voted 6-piece for TNA, URP, ODM, Wiper, etc. Now, the Constitution and the Political Parties Act categorically state that the consequences for the resignation of an MP or a senator from the party that sponsored them to parliament is the declaration of a vacancy in the position and the call for a by-election. Therefore, if you are a Jubilee MP and you move from Jubilee to UDA, be fair to the people who voted you in and seek a fresh mandate from your voters. In fact, the Jubilee Party Secretariat should not wait for the NDC. Raphael Tuju should issue an immediate written notice of resignation to the clerks of the Senate and the National Assembly for the disloyal MPs. And IEBC should start preparing for mass by-elections.
Are they ready for that?
I don't know.
So I think I'm going to just take it back a bit to what we began to discuss yesterday. And in that light, I have a simple question. What is the logic of a Ruto presidency? And by logic, I mean, what are the factors that confirm that he will win in 2022? And I ask this because in the history of elections in Kenya, there are two major things that have allowed us to predict election outcomes. And in our view, these factors are the science of numbers and history. Numbers indicate where votes converge, and history confirms how these trends move over time. And with that in mind, how does Ruto expect to win? Because in our view, these two factors, history and numbers, are currently not on his side. So let me explain my thoughts. One, the history of our elections is that voter turnout on election day averages about 71%. So we can assume, at least for now, that only 71% of all registered voters will turn up to vote in 2022. And considering how poor the mass registration exercise was, this might even be lower. Two, the starting point for any candidate will always be their ethnic voting bloc. This is what history has taught us and is very unlikely to change. Here, for example, Ruto starts with 71% of his registered Kalenjin voters, which stands at around 1.9 million. The point here is that no one leader can achieve 50% plus one all alone. Coalitions are going to define how the presidency will be formed, which leads to my third point. We all know this. Gema have become the kingmakers as we approach 2022. And this is why everyone is spending so much time flirting for their affection. Their votes have become key. But history tells us that Gema is complicated. Will they come out if one of their own is missing from the ballot? And because of this, any presidential candidate must get a slice of the mountain in order to win. And we predict that this will be in the form of a Gema running mate. Hi, Martha. So now these are just my thoughts, and I could be wrong. But it appears that this logic of a guaranteed 100% Ruto presidency doesn't even hold up when examined. He is simply using the optics of crowds to mislead us. And this focus on crowds confirms to me, at least, that Ruto is a man of hubris, which is very dangerous for country. And this is because hubris speaks to excessive confidence or arrogance. It leads a person to believe that they can do no wrong. And in politics, this has been widely recorded. In the run-up to World War II, for example, Neville Chamberlain wrongly believed that he could appease Hitler. Tony Blair supported the invasion of Iraq even after his own advisors confirmed to him that the plan had no leadership, no strategy, and no coordination. So can you call political hubris an illness then? According to psychologists and sociologists, yes, you can. And it appears that William Ruto is suffering from this sickness. And he is so confident that he's surrounding himself with people who only tell him what he wants to hear, when our long-standing election factors are telling him otherwise. So good luck there.
Good luck to him. We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines for you. We ask ourselves three questions. Is the headline topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking and thoughtful, or just plain lazy? Let's take a look back at the headlines again. Daily Nation, the high cost of indiscipline. Standard, who'll stop the horror of school infernos. The Star, Uhuru to explain succession game plan at key event. And People Daily, Ruto, Mutahi to go in Jubilee Purge.
I think I would park, again, out of respect, the school-related headlines.
Daily Nation and the Standard, we park those out of respect for the trauma that the students and the parents are going through, and the teachers.
Word of advice to Magoha, he cannot rule with an iron fist. He needs to relax a bit.
I think he's that bull in a china shop. I think that there was a cartoon that once depicted him as such. Well,
I do like the one of the People Daily.
I do too. I think I will toss the Star in favor of PD. People Daily gives us our winning headline. And now on to our final thought. But before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. This week is inspired by military operations. And today we start with Operation Rolling Thunder. And so Operation Rolling Thunder was the code name for an American bombing campaign that happened during the Vietnam War. And this massive bombardment was intended to put military pressure on North Vietnam's communist leaders and reduce their capacity to wage war against the US-supported government of South Vietnam. So then, and I still believe now, the Vietnam War is known as one of the most controversial events in US history. It was a long, costly, and divisive conflict that was intensified by the ongoing Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union. But at the heart of the conflict was the desire of North Vietnam to unify the entire country under a single communist regime modeled after what they saw before, with the Soviet Union and China. The South Vietnamese government, on the other hand, fought to preserve a Vietnam more closely aligned with the West. And so being well aware of the domestic political consequences of losing another country to the communists, the US got what I would call overly involved in Vietnam. At the time, the US was working to establish itself as a leader of the free capitalist world and the enemy of communism. And this global presence really shaped the way that the US looked at the world and would eventually shape the American view in Vietnam. And this nurtured what some have called an us versus them or democracy versus communism mindset within the US government. However, throughout their involvement in Vietnam, we see that the US was very indecisive about how to proceed. Its mission and purpose for engaging the North Vietnamese was not clearly defined. But in seeking to stop the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia, this Operation Rolling Thunder was designed to send a clear message to the Soviets during the Cold War. But more importantly, it was aimed to demoralize the Viet Cong on the ground to surrender. I call it an extreme response to a very simple ideological question. And in the end, this Operation Rolling Thunder became the longest strategic bombing campaign in the history of the US Air Force, lasting for 3 years and 9 months from March 1965 through to November 1968, and became this quite dark blemish on American involvement on the continent. And I think Ms. Kay will tell us more about that.
Yes, so the Operation Rolling Thunder, like she said, the campaign began on March the 2nd, 1965. 104 United States Air Force and 19 South Vietnamese Air Force aircrafts attacked a small military supply depot and a minor naval base in Quang Ke, is that what they call it? Che, in North Vietnam. The bombing of North Vietnam would continue, like she said, for 3 years, 43 months, and it became one of the most controversial military campaigns in United States history. The operation had 3 objectives. 1, to reduce the flow and increase the cost of the continued infiltration of men and supplies from North to South Vietnam. 2, to raise the morale of the South Vietnamese people who at the time Rolling Thunder began were under severe military pressure. And 3, to make clear to the North Vietnamese political leadership that so long as they continued their aggression against South Vietnam, they would pay the price in North Vietnam. So Rolling Thunder was meant to be a punitive expedition and a test of will. At first, the airstrikes were restricted to the southern portion of North Vietnam, but the campaign gradually expanded in both range and intensity to increase pressure on the Vietnamese government. By mid-1966, American planes were attacking military and industrial targets throughout North Vietnam. The only areas considered off-limits for the bombing raids were the cities of Hanoi and Haiphong and the 10-mile buffer zone along the China border. But the bombing campaign failed. The bombs often missed their targets and fell into empty jungle. The North Vietnamese guerrillas knew the jungle better and they made better use of underground bases and tunnels to shelter from US bombs. Then they would often reuse the unexploded American bombs against US soldiers. And worse yet, the US troops used such brutal tactics that they often drove more Vietnamese civilians to support the Viet Cong, and they turned the American public against its own army. The war in Vietnam was a very unpopular war. In 1968, with mounting criticism of the Vietnam War at home and abroad, American President Johnson announced that he would stop the bombing of North Vietnam.
That's right. Operation Thunder, Rolling Thunder, sought to defeat the enemy through demoralization. And that is a principle in war when you aim to drain the enemy of their morale so that they don't want to fight. And morale in warfare is a remarkably important thing. Soldiers who lose the will to fight either fight poorly or throw down their weapons with relatively little encouragement. Now, Rolling Thunder severely damaged North Vietnam's ability to continue the war. These American strategic bombers, they disabled 85% of North Vietnam's petroleum storage capacity, 70% of its power generation capacity, 70% of its ammunition storage resources, and 25% of its barracks facilities, amongst many other targets, critical infrastructure such as bridges and roads and what have you. And to this extent, I must say, in terms of destroying critical infrastructure in the country, the bombing was actually a success, right? But Vietnam was resilient. The Viet Cong were resilient. They dispersed their military assets widely throughout the country. They mitigated most of the damage to the bridges and to the roads. the supply routes. They found innovative ways of going around all this destruction. They constructed bypasses and so on. And so, the question here is, what was America's thinking? Again, militarily, what is it that they wanted to achieve? They wanted to show and use far greater force than the enemy.
Yeah.
They were attempting the age-old tradition of overwhelming your opponent when you're at war. And this is, again, the simplest and oldest of approaches, where you pitch a battle between troops of roughly equal ability, and you see who the best man is, and the last man standing becomes the winner. But the trouble for them was that the Vietnamese were doing guerrilla warfare, as you mentioned, Ms. Kay. And guerrilla warfare is surreptitious and it's hidden. Guerrillas attack in relatively small groups where they target specific locations rather than engaging large forces. And the best case, obviously, of guerrilla warfare, I think that is taught across the entire world, is the Viet Cong, is actually the Vietnam War. And the Viet Cong lived in this jungle within North Vietnam amongst the population, from which they managed to harass American forces, destroy buildings in the south, destroy their installations. And ultimately, the Americans lost the war. They might have won the Battle of Operation Rolling Thunder, but they were kicked out of the country. They eventually left because...
And left embarrassed.
Very embarrassed.
Absolutely, with the tail between the legs.
The legs. As a superpower, I felt like when you said equal forces, I felt like the Vietnamese were always at a disadvantage, but they made it through guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
Anyway, we had a winning headline today from People Daily. We parked the Daily Nation and Standard out of respect for what is going on in high schools at the moment. Again, don't forget to find us on your TV screens. We're on Pan Free to Air, Go TV and Star Times. I'll leave with a quote from a gentleman named William Blake. It's about what enemies do. When a sinister person means to be your enemy, they always start by trying to become your friend. Do have a great evening.